Okay, so this is a brief policy guide for Google Apps for Education. I'm doing a few of these. This one is about mail policies, probably one of the most important that you need to set up in any new Google Apps for Education setup. So we're at the control panel here, and this is your admin console, and the place where you will set up most of your policies is this one that's called Google Apps here. So if we click on that, what you'll find is that you'll have the core services listed here. So calendar down to talk, hangouts at the bottom, and you will see the status of each of these services, which will tell you whether they're on or off, or in some of my cases they're on for selected groups of people. So we're going to look at mail settings. So if we click on Gmail, you'll get the basic look to the mail settings there, so you can see how many active users you've had in the last 7 days. Ours is quite low at the moment because it's the Christmas holidays, but there's still 441 people looking at their email over the Christmas holidays. And then you have a number of options down here to explore, but if you look on the M here, you've got on for some organizations. You've got some global settings here, so you can turn email on and off. This is globally. To select which sub-organizations you've got it turned on for or off for, you click on this little blue thing here, and then you'll see your sub-organizational structure appear here, and this is where you can turn it on or off for a particular sub-organizational unit. So this is the root of my domain, the master setting, and it's on. So by default Gmail is on for all users. Within this sub-organizational structure, you'll find that Gmail is turned off for some users. So if I delve into students and I pick, let's try that one, you'll find that I've got a sub-organizational unit within students called disabled email. So for example, if a student were to abuse email in some way, then they can be temporarily popped into this sub-organizational unit, and this one has email turned off. So you can do some clever things by which you can turn different services on or off. You can do this with any service, not just mail. So there are a lot of things on here. Email addresses will simply list all of your email addresses, so I'm not going to go into that. Labs allows you to turn on and off experimental features within mail. We're going to look at user settings, which is the most important part of this. So if we click on that, what you'll find is at the top you'll have your sub-organizational structure, which you can expand. So the policies we've got here can be selectively applied to different sub-organizational units. So you don't have to have the same policies for all users. You can have widely different policies for different groups of users, and you may want to have very different policies for staff and for students, which I've got. We're just going to look through the global settings and to give you some idea. At the top you've got the web address for your mail. So this is for the current custom web portal. So this is the one that isn't the generic Google login, but is one where users don't have to put in the domain name. So you can set this to be whatever you want. You will have to be able to go into your domain hosting to be able to actually make the change work. So that's the URL. The MX records, these are Google's MX records. You can find these on the Google Enterprise website, but you're given them here. I believe these are the same for everybody, I think. I've looked on the Enterprise website and these match exactly what it says there. These are the records that you need to put into your domain hosting, and it is really very much, or it should be, a simple matter of copy and pasting those into your domain hosting's MX records section. It's a couple of minute job, but if you don't do that, the mail won't work. Okay, so if we just run through the policies and the sorts of things that you can do, I'm going to skip through some of them because in terms of the education context they're probably not that important, and this is from the point of view of ourselves. We use just web-based mail. You can use things like Outlook as well if you want to. This allows email migration. You really don't want to uninstall the service. So end user settings are what we're going to focus on. So themes is the first important one, and this may seem simple, but there's a subtlety to it. If you don't have that selected, you get the generic white email theme, which is fine. Remember, you can apply this to sub-organization units, so you could allow some users to set their own theme while others can't set their own theme. With students, the issue with themes can potentially be that some of the themes they choose could be inappropriate, and it's very difficult, close on impossible, to filter out the inappropriate ones. And you can also make custom themes. So it's just something to be aware of, probably more of a classroom management issue. We have themes turned on for all users, so therefore they can have some ownership of what their mail looks like. You may choose to have it turned off for students or certain students. Email read receipts is a feature of enterprise Gmail. You won't find this on regular Gmail. So a read receipt is when you send a message and then there's a little thing that asks the person to confirm that they've read the message, and you'll know whether they've read the message or not. So we allow email read receipts and prompt the user for each read receipt request. So basically the user gets prompted to say that, have you read this mail? That's quite a useful feature. Some staff use it and it appears as an option when you send the message. Mail delegation. That means that other users can access your mailbox. Now that might seem like a bad thing, but we have some non-person accounts. For example, reception@wheatleypark.org would be one of quite a few, and you want multiple people to be able to access that inbox alongside their regular inbox. So within settings on a user's mail, you can delegate that inbox so other people can actually look at it. It's a useful feature. It's used by admin staff mainly. The name format is something that you might want to think about. First, last is what we have. You can have it the other way around, and you can allow users to customize this setting. So if a user wants to use a slightly different version of their first name, they can do that, for example. You might not want to allow that. This is really useful to have turned on. It's turned on by default. Enable app search for my users. So this makes a Gmail search more powerful, because search isn't just email, it's also Google Documents, and sites are searched as well. I can't think of any reason why you wouldn't want that turned on, but it is a very powerful thing. End user access. We haven't touched POP or IMAP access. That's not something we've needed to look at. Outlook and BlackBerry support. Enable Google Apps Sync and Google Apps Connector for my users. Google Apps Sync is a tool that you can download, you can deploy across a Windows network as an MSI, and you can run that tool, put in the Google Apps username and password, and it will automatically configure Outlook for the end user. A few members of Office staff still use Outlook for various reasons, and it makes setting up Outlook incredibly easy. So I would have that turned on. If you're not interested in using Outlook, it doesn't matter really. Automatic forwarding. Allow users to automatically forward incoming mail to another address. We have a few accounts where we do that. Offline Gmail is a useful option, especially if you're using Chromebooks and occasionally you're offline, and it allows you to read your mail without having to have a local email client. Allow per user outbound gateways. That's the standard setting, and I wouldn't touch it unless that involves you. Image URL and proxy whitelist. Again, I don't think that's something that most people would need to touch, but I believe it allows you to filter images, but there's been some updates on that recently by which it automatically displays images because they've changed the way images are filtered and scanned, and it seems to work fine, and I haven't changed anything there. Spam, you can configure your spam filter here, enter an IP address for your email whitelist. Again, we haven't actually configured any of this. Inbound gateway, the only one I can imagine would be really useful for a school is perhaps spam. Create a approved sender list that bypasses the spam folder. So if you've got some automated system in school, or you receive some emails from some automated system, they might be considered to be spam. So when you mouse over to the right, the configure boxes will appear, so I can click on configure here, and I haven't got a list, so use or create a new one, and then you can create a sender that bypasses the spam filter, and that might be useful if you want to automatically allow something for a group of users or all of your users. Block senders, so you can block senders from specific senders or specific domains, so we can click on configure there, and add addresses or domains that you want to automatically reject messages from, so we can create a list of ones that you don't want students doing things, and I've created a couple for this. So you can have domains or individuals, and you can automatically reject those into spam. The one I just want to mention more than any other really is compliance, because compliance is really quite powerful. Email retention is fairly straightforward. You can automatically clear people's inboxes out if you want to. I wouldn't do this globally. I'd have do not delete email messages automatically. People might get upset if you change this, but for certain types of users that might be a useful thing to do, to set it on a certain particular sub-organizational unit. Append footer. So this is to put a standard email footer on every message that's sent, or every message from a particular sub-organizational unit. So we click on edit here. You can see that we've got this standard school disclaimer thingamajiggy that I've pasted in here. You can edit this, and you can you got this nice little editor thingamajiggy here. So you can add an email footer. You can have a different email footer for different sub-organizational units. That setting there is only if you use things like Outlook. Restrict delivery. Restrict the domains that your users are allowed to exchange emails with. Only allow sending or receiving email messages from addresses or domains that you specify. So this would restrict who a particular user within a particular sub-organization can send a message to. So if you only wanted them to be able to send a message to a particular domain or a group of domains, then you could do that. You would restrict. You could restrict very severely, or you could tie down very closely who they could message. The three I think which are probably the most powerful and the most useful are these three here: content compliance, objectionable content, and attachment compliance. Content compliance allows you to create, as it says, advanced content filters based on words, phrases, or patterns. So if any part of the mail, and you can specify which part of the message contains a particular phrase or a particular word or a particular pattern, then you can decide what happens to that message. So if we click on configure, this is where you can do some really clever stuff. You can choose, you'll need to create a description of the rule. Okay, so student content, just call it that for now. And then you need to specify whether the email message is to be affected at inbound, outbound, internal sending, or receiving. So let's just have all of them. And then there's two bits to this. There's the rule, and then there's what happens to the message. So if any of the following match the message, or if all the following match the message. So if any would just match one of these expressions we're going to put in. If all of them would have to be there. So we're going to add, because I haven't got any in the default one, a simple content match. So that could be a word, it could be a phrase. I'll leave it up to your imagination, the sort of things you might want to block, but you could imagine a load of four-letter words or phrases which is something to do with inciting hate, or phrases used in bullying, or anything that you could imagine that you might want to create some sort of event when that message is sent. So simple content match, or you can have an advanced content match. And in this case you can actually look up specific parts of the mail. So location, header and body, and there's a load which you can choose. So you could, for example, have it in the subject of the mail and contains text, and then you could look at the content that it's going to have there. So it might be any messages with a particular subject that you want something to happen with. But there are lots of options and lots of combinations that you can look at. You can make some really quite complicated rules. Once you've decided what you want to look for, and you can make these up as you go along, you don't have to start with loads and loads of complicated rules. You might come up with a situation where somebody's been sending a certain type of message, and actually I don't really want people sending that sort of message, or I want to know if somebody's sending that sort of message. Then you've got the option to say, well, what's going to happen? So you can simply reject the message, and then you can put in a custom message saying this message has been rejected because, and the person will know, well, okay, I can't send messages that contain that, and that's it. I could modify the message, and this is where it gets quite powerful, in fact very powerful. There's lots of you can edit the header, so you can add a custom header if you want. Prepend the custom subject. I do this on some, so you change the nature of the subject. You can change the root, but the one I use the most is change the envelope recipient. So you click on that, and then you can send the message to a different person. So if it's got a certain type of content, you might want that to go to IT support. If it's got other sort of content, what I do is send it to the head of year, and the original recipient doesn't receive the message, and the message goes straight to the head of year. They have a little custom header that says this is what this message is about, and they can act upon it, and the person who was meant to get the message, it might have been something unpleasant sent towards them, they're none the wiser, they've never received the message, but action can be taken against the sender. And there's other options here. You can send it straight into the spam filter, and so on. Okay, and you can experiment with those options. So that's content compliance. Build some very complicated and powerful rules there. Objectionable content is simpler, although it does a similar thing, but this is based purely on a list of words. So we can click on that. Now you can choose these, obviously. Objectionable contents. So this is just words. There's no phrases here, and you're not going to be able to apply this to, say, the subject or any other particular part. This is just looking for words. So this is, in a sense, a simpler thing to set up, but is nevertheless very powerful. So you can add, say, cat was an objectionable word. You could add cat. Or you could add as many words as you want to your objectionable word list, and you could have different word lists for different sub-organizational units. And again, that's the rule. What's going to happen? So you're going to modify the message, or you're going to reject the message. And again, the one I like is changing the envelope recipient, so somebody else gets the message and they can take the appropriate action. So in the case I have an objectionable word list, it goes to the head of year, and the intended recipient never receives the unpleasant email. The head of year does, and the rather surprised student comes up to them and says, "I didn't send that message." Yes, you did, and because I've got it. So that's objectionable content. Attachment compliance allows you to control what sort of attachments can be sent or received. So again, you can specify whether this is inbound, outbound, or internal. And the bottom bit is exactly the same as the previous two, so that's what is going to happen when somebody tries to do this. Or if we click on to add, instead of having a list of words or a list of phrases, this time we've got attachment types. I've often thought it might be amusing to ban Office files as attachments, but I think some people might get upset by that. But you can ban certain types of files, which may or may not be useful. So those content compliance ones are really quite useful. There's some stuff about routing down at the bottom. For a regular Google Apps for Education install, I don't think you need to touch any of that stuff. I certainly haven't, and it's mainly to do with if you've got sort of a non-standard Google Apps sort of setup. So they're user settings for mail, and remember, you can set up those rules for specific sub-organizational units. So I've been looking at the root of my domain, but what in reality I would be doing is setting up these rules for particular sub-organizational units. So each of these sub-organizational units will have certain rules, spam rules and content compliance rules, which you can see along here. Okay. Yeah, so here we've got some objectionable content. I've only got 5 objectionable words for this particular year group, but you could have different objectionable words. I've appended the footer, so it's come up with the ones that I've actually configured are at the top. Anyways, that gives you an idea, hopefully, about how you can configure mail and some of the rules that you can create. And I would suggest having a play around with those rules, setting up some test users in a test sub-organizational user, logging on as those users, and finding out what happens when you send emails, and testing out your rules that you create and seeing whether they do actually do what you think they're meant to do before you apply a rule to a live group of users. Okay, thank you for watching.